The sound of death echoed through Montana's frozen wilderness. A gunshot, followed by an agonizing roar, shattered the pre-dawn silence. Wildlife rehabilitator Emma Thompson jolted awake in her cabin at Mountain Haven Sanctuary, her instincts already screaming that this morning would be different. Within minutes, her radio crackled with a forest ranger's desperate message. A mother bear gunned down by poachers, and somewhere in that vast, snow-covered expanse, a cub's life hung by a thread. Emma had saved countless wild animals over her. 15 years at the sanctuary, but fate was about to test her in ways she never imagined. What began as a race against time to save an orphaned bear cub would evolve into an extraordinary decade-long journey, challenging everything the wildlife community thought they knew about the emotional capacity of wild animals. No one could have predicted that 10 years later, this same bear, now a magnificent adult, would recognize Emma in a chance encounter that left hardened wildlife experts speechless. Their reunion, witnessed by astounded researchers, would rewrite scientific understanding of wild animals' capacity for memory and emotional connection. This is not just another tale of wildlife rescue. This is a story of survival against impossible, odds of trust forged in desperate moments, and of a bond so profound it would transcend the fundamental laws of wild nature. Through blizzards and hunger, triumph and heartbreak, their journey would prove that sometimes the most extraordinary connections are found in the most unlikely places. Emma's truck thundered through the snowy mountain roads, each minute stretching like an eternity. The ranger's coordinates led her deep into the Gallatin National Forest, where ancient pines stood as silent witnesses to countless untold stories. Her emergency kit rattled in the passenger seat, packed with everything from thermal blankets to specialized formula for orphaned cubs. The scene that awaited her made her blood run cold. The mother bear lay motionless in the crimson-stained snow, her massive body already growing stiff in the bitter cold. But it was the tiny whimper that drew Emma's attention. There, curled against its mother's lifeless form, lay a black bear, cub no more than 3 months old. Emma approached with practiced caution, her breath visible in the freezing air. The cub's condition was critical. Its small body trembled uncontrollably, ribs visible through matted fur. Most concerning were its glazed eyes, showing signs of severe hypothermia and dehydration. Time was running out. 15 years of experience guided her movements as she worked swiftly to assess the cub's condition. Its temperature was dangerously low, pulse weak and irregular. The sanctuary's protocols usually dictated minimal human contact, but this situation demanded immediate intervention. With gentle movements, Emma wrapped the cub in thermal blankets, noting how it lacked even the strength to resist. Back at Mountain Haven, the emergency response team sprang into action. The sanctuary's veterinarian, Dr. Rachel Chen, had already prepared the intensive care unit. Hours blurred together as they worked to stabilize the tiny patient. Warm fluids, carefully calculated medications, and constant monitoring became their world. Throughout that first night, Emma refused to leave the cub's side. Every shallow breath felt like a victory, every small response to treatment a miracle. As dawn approached, she noticed something remarkable in those dark eyes. Despite its horrific ordeal, there was a spark of fierce determination, a will to live that touched something deep within her soul. The morning sun brought the first signs of hope. The cub's temperature had stabilized, and it had managed to keep down small amounts of specialized formula. Emma knew the hardest part of her job would be maintaining professional distance. Wildlife rehabilitation demanded a delicate balance, nurturing without taming, caring without domesticating. Yet something about this little survivor told her their story would be different. As she watched the cub take its first wobbly steps in the recovery enclosure, Emma couldn't have known she was witnessing the beginning of an unprecedented journey. This tiny bear would not only survive, but would go on to challenge everything. We thought we knew about wild animals' capacity for memory and emotional connection. Their paths would cross again in a way that would leave the scientific community in awe and prove that some bonds transcend the boundaries between wild and tame. As the Montana spring slowly melted away winter's grip, Mountain Haven Sanctuary became home to an unprecedented journey of rehabilitation. Emma named the bear cub Luna, after the crescent moon marking on her chest, though she knew names were discouraged in wildlife rehabilitation. The real challenge lay not in saving Luna's life, but in walking the razor-thin line between care and wild independence. The first weeks tested every ounce of Emma's experience and patience. Luna required feeding every 4 hours, day and night. The specialized formula, carefully designed to mimic bear's milk, had to be prepared at exact temperatures. Too hot or too cold could trigger rejection, something they couldn't risk with Luna's fragile health. Emma's world narrowed to the rhythm of preparation, feeding, cleaning, and monitoring. Mountain Haven's protocols were strict for good reason. Every interaction had to be carefully calculated to prevent imprinting, the dangerous process where a wild animal becomes too comfortable with humans. Emma wore the same scent-masking gear for each feeding, maintaining minimal eye contact, keeping her movements precise and professional. Yet Luna's remarkable resilience made this clinical approach increasingly challenging. By the third week, Luna's personality began to emerge through her growing strength. She showed an extraordinary curiosity about her surroundings, investigating every corner of her recovery space with determined focus. Her appetite grew stronger, and with it came the first real challenge. Luna needed to learn to forage, but teaching a wild animal to be wild while under human care required incredible skill and patience. Emma developed an innovative approach to Luna's rehabilitation. She created complex feeding puzzles, hiding small portions of food in increasingly challenging locations. Natural materials from the forest, logs, rocks, and vegetation were regularly rotated through Luna's enclosure, keeping her environment novel and engaging. Each item was carefully selected to mirror what she would encounter in the wild. As spring turned to summer, Luna's progress exceeded all expectations. Her coat grew thick and glossy, her eyes bright with wild energy. She showed remarkable problem-solving abilities, often figuring out Emma's food puzzles faster than anticipated. But it was her distinct personality that truly set her apart. Unlike other cubs Emma had rehabilitated, Luna displayed an unusual awareness of her surroundings, often pausing in her play to observe the world with almost contemplative attention. The sanctuary's staff began noticing something unique in the dynamic between Emma and Luna. While maintaining all professional protocols, there seemed to be an unspoken understanding between them. Luna would often pause in her activities when Emma entered the observation area, not with fear or aggression, but with a calm acknowledgement that puzzled even veteran rehabilitators. Summer brought new challenges and triumphs. Luna learned to climb, her growing strength evident in the way she navigated the specially designed structures in her enclosure. Emma introduced seasonal foods that wild bears would naturally encounter, carefully documenting Luna's responses and preferences. Every success was tempered with the knowledge that each day brought them closer to the inevitable release. The most challenging aspect of Luna's rehabilitation came in maintaining her wild instincts while providing necessary care. Emma developed a system of minimal contact feeding where food would appear in natural settings without human presence. Remote cameras monitored Luna's progress, allowing the team to observe her natural behaviors without interference. These recordings revealed a bear cub growing more confident and capable with each passing day. As autumn approached, Luna's transformation became evident to everyone at Mountain Haven. The fragile cub that had arrived barely clinging to life had become a strong, capable young bear. She showed all the natural wariness of humans that would be crucial for her survival, yet there remained something special in her occasional interactions with Emma. It wasn't dependence or domestication, but rather a kind of wild wisdom that seemed to recognize the role Emma had played in her survival. The day Luna successfully caught live fish in her pond marked a significant milestone. Emma watched from the observation post as the young bear displayed perfect natural hunting techniques, her movements precise and instinctive. It was a bittersweet moment, pride mixing with the growing realization that their time together was growing shorter. Few could have predicted how this period of rehabilitation would lay the groundwork for something extraordinary. The bond forming between them, while professionally maintained within rehabilitation protocols, would prove to have depths that would astound the wildlife community years later. As winter approached again, Emma knew they were entering the final phase of their time together. Luna had grown into everything a wild bear should be. But she had also become something more, something that would challenge our understanding of wild animals' capacity for connection. The Montana winter was approaching, painting the landscape in rich autumn colors. For Emma Thompson, these shortening days brought a mixture of pride and heartache. Luna had grown into a strong, capable young bear, and the time had come for the most challenging part of wildlife rehabilitation: letting go. Final preparations began as the leaves turned golden. Luna's training intensified with carefully planned exercises to sharpen her survival instincts. Emma and her team created increasingly complex foraging challenges, scattering natural foods throughout Luna's expanded enclosure. They watched with satisfaction as she expertly dug for roots, stripped bark for insects, and demonstrated perfect hunting techniques in her pond. The sanctuary's protocol required all rehabilitated bears to prove their survival capabilities before release. Luna excelled at every test. She showed appropriate fear responses to predator sounds, demonstrated excellent climbing skills, and maintained a healthy wariness of humans, even those who had cared for her. Her only exception was Emma, whom she would acknowledge with a calm awareness that both impressed and concerned the rehabilitation team. As the release date approached, Emma began the difficult process of further distancing herself. Every interaction was reduced, feeding times became completely random, and human presence near Luna's enclosure was strictly limited. These changes were crucial to ensure Luna would rely solely on her wild instincts once released. The young bear responded perfectly, becoming more independent and focused on her natural behaviors. The morning of the release arrived with a heavy frost coating the ground. Emma had barely slept, her mind replaying every moment of their journey together. The transport cage was prepared before dawn, and the release site had been carefully chosen in a remote area of protected forest, far from human settlements but rich in natural food sources. Loading Luna into the transport cage proved surprisingly smooth. The young bear entered calmly, her dark eyes briefly meeting Emma's with that same inexplicable awareness that had marked their entire journey together. The drive to the release site was silent, except for the occasional rustle from the cage and the crunch of tires on the frost-covered forest road. The chosen location was a secluded valley, bordered by dense forest and a clear mountain stream. Perfect bear habitat. Emma and her team positioned the cage facing the tree line, following every safety protocol while their hearts raced with anticipation. This was the moment every rehabilitator both longed for and dreaded. When the cage door opened, Luna didn't bolt immediately as most bears did. Instead, she emerged with deliberate calm, her nose testing the air, ears swiveling to catch every sound of her new environment. She took a few steps forward, her powerful body moving with the natural grace she had developed. Then she paused, turning her head slightly toward where Emma stood at the prescribed safe distance. For a brief moment, their eyes met one final time. In that gaze was something that would haunt Emma for years to come. It wasn't fear or dependency, but something deeper, more profound. Then, with powerful strides, Luna moved toward the forest edge. Her dark form merged with the shadows of the trees, each step taking her further from the human world and deeper into her natural domain. Emma maintained her professional composure as protocol required, but her heart raced with conflicting emotions. Joy at a successful rehabilitation mixed with a deep ache of loss. Luna's final glance seemed to linger in her mind, carrying a weight she couldn't quite understand. The team remained at the release site for the required observation period, monitoring Luna's initial exploration of her new territory. As the sun climbed higher, Luna's form disappeared completely into the wilderness. The tracking collar she wore would provide data for the next year, but the immediate connection was now severed. Emma knew this was exactly what they had worked toward, the perfect outcome of wildlife rehabilitation. Yet something felt different about this goodbye. Back at Mountain Haven, Emma completed the final paperwork, officially closing Luna's case file. By all professional measures, this was a textbook successful rehabilitation and release. But as she watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of their story. Something in Luna's final look, in the way she had acknowledged their connection one last time, suggested that perhaps some bonds transcend the boundaries we create between wild and tame. The years following Luna's release flowed like the mountain streams that carved through the Montana wilderness. Emma Thompson continued her work at Mountain Haven Sanctuary, her hands and heart healing countless wild creatures. Yet among the blur of rehabilitated animals, memories of Luna remained crystal clear, surfacing in quiet moments like morning. Mist rising from the valley. The tracking collar had provided updates for that first crucial year. Luna had adapted perfectly to wildlife, establishing a territory near her release site, successfully foraging and even surviving her first winter in the wilderness. When the collar finally went silent, Emma found comfort in occasional reports from forest rangers who spotted a female black bear with a distinctive crescent moon marking on her chest. The landscape itself had changed over the decade. Climate shifts brought longer summers and shorter winters. Forest fires had scarred parts of the region, while conservation efforts had preserved others. These changes brought new challenges for the local wildlife, and Mountain Haven saw an increasing number of animals needing rehabilitation. Emma's reputation grew throughout these years. Her success with Luna had led to innovative rehabilitation, techniques that became standard practice across several wildlife sanctuaries. She trained new rehabilitators, wrote papers on wild animal care, and continued to champion the delicate balance between human intervention and wild independence. During her regular forest surveys, Emma would sometimes find herself near Luna's release site. These visits were part of her job, monitoring local wildlife populations and checking for any animals in distress. Yet each time she entered that particular valley, her heart would beat a little faster, her eyes scanning the tree line with extra attention. The forest held subtle signs of bear activity, claw marks on trees, overturned logs, and the occasional track in mud or snow. Emma knew the territory supported several black bears, and she took professional pride in these signs of a healthy ecosystem. Still, she couldn't help wondering which marks might have been left by Luna. Spring surveys were particularly poignant, as they marked the anniversary of Luna's arrival at the sanctuary. Emma would often find herself pausing in her work, remembering the tiny cub fighting for life in that brutal winter. She would recall the midnight feedings, the gradual strengthening, and that remarkable intelligence that had made Luna unique among her rehabilitated animals. The sanctuary itself had evolved over the decade. New facilities were built, including a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center for large predators. Emma had overseen its design, incorporating lessons learned from Luna's care. Each improvement was a testament to the ongoing commitment to wildlife preservation, yet also a reminder of that extraordinary rehabilitation that had started it all. Local attitudes toward wildlife had shifted too. The poaching incident that had orphaned Luna had sparked increased conservation efforts and stricter enforcement of wildlife protection laws. Emma found satisfaction in knowing that their work was slowly changing how humans and wild animals coexisted in these mountains. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of early morning or late evening, Emma would sit on the sanctuary's observation deck, watching the sun paint the mountains in gold and purple. She would think about all the animals that had passed through Mountain Haven, each with their own story of survival. Yet Luna's story remained unfinished in her mind, like a book missing its final chapter. The tracking data had shown that Luna had grown into a strong, healthy wild bear. There were even reports suggesting she had successfully raised cubs of her own, contributing to the local bear population. Yet Emma couldn't help wondering if somewhere in those vast forests, Luna retained any memory of their time together, any echo of that remarkable connection they had shared. The autumn morning painted the Montana wilderness in strokes of gold and crimson as Emma Thompson began her routine wildlife survey. After 25 years of working in these forests, she knew every trail, every ridge, and every valley. This particular morning brought her to a remote section near Luna's old release site, an area she still monitored with special attention. The air carried the crisp sweetness of fallen leaves and approaching winter. Emma moved quietly through the underbrush, documenting signs of wildlife activity in her weathered notebook. Recent bear markings on trees, fresh tracks in the morning dew, and overturned logs all told the story of a healthy ecosystem. Her trained eyes captured every detail, though her mind occasionally drifted to memories of a special bear with a crescent moon marking. The sun had climbed higher when Emma reached a small clearing beside a mountain stream. She paused to record some fresh deer tracks when a sound made her freeze. Years of experience had taught her the weight and intention behind every forest noise. This was the distinct sound of a large animal moving through the brush, and it was approaching her location. Emma's hand instinctively moved to her bear spray as she assessed her surroundings. The wind shifted, carrying her scent toward the approaching animal. Protocol dictated that she should make noise, announce her presence to avoid surprising any wildlife. But before she could act, a massive black form emerged from the trees on the clearing's edge. Time seemed to stop. There, barely 30 yards away, stood a fully grown female black bear. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The bear's size suggested she was in her prime, probably around 12 years old, but it was the distinctive crescent moon marking on her chest that made Emma's heart race. After 10 years, Luna stood before her. The bear's posture showed no aggression. Her head was raised, nose testing the air with focused attention. Emma remained perfectly still, her professional training warring with the emotional storm brewing inside her. Every protocol, every safety regulation demanded that she slowly back away. Yet something in Luna's demeanor kept her rooted to the spot. What happened next would later be documented in wildlife journals and debated in scientific circles. Luna took several slow, deliberate steps forward, her movement carrying none of the tension typically associated with bear encounters. Her eyes, deep brown and startlingly intelligent, fixed directly on Emma's face. The recognition in that gaze was unmistakable. Emma found herself whispering Luna's name, her voice barely a breath in the morning air. The bear's ears twitched at the sound, and she made a soft, chuffing noise, a sound Emma remembered from their days at the sanctuary. It was a sound of acknowledgement, of comfort, that she had heard countless times during late-night feedings and rehabilitation sessions. Luna settled into a relaxed sitting position, maintaining a respectful distance but showing no intention of leaving. Her behavior defied everything known about wild bear encounters. She was neither defensive nor seeking food. Instead, she displayed a calm awareness that seemed to bridge the decade that had passed since their last meeting. For nearly an hour, they shared the clearing in what could only be described as a peaceful reunion. Luna occasionally grazed on nearby berries or investigated interesting scents, but she always returned her attention to Emma. Her movements were those of a confident wild animal, yet there was an undeniable gentleness in her manner that spoke of remembered connection. Emma observed through tears she couldn't hold back, noting every detail of Luna's appearance. The bear had grown into a magnificent adult, her coat thick and healthy, her body strong and well-fed. There were scars that told stories of survival, of battles won and challenges overcome. She had lived fully as a wild bear, exactly as they had hoped during her rehabilitation. As the sun climbed toward noon, Luna's behavior began to shift. She stood stretching her powerful frame and gave Emma one final profound look. Then, with the same deliberate calm that had marked their entire encounter, she turned and moved back into the forest. Her departure carried no urgency, no fear, just the natural rhythm of a wild animal returning to its domain. Emma remained in the clearing long after Luna had disappeared, her hands shaking as she documented every detail of the encounter. Her scientific mind raced to rationalize what had happened, while her heart knew she had just experienced something extraordinary. This wasn't just a chance meeting between a human and a wild animal. It was a reunion that challenged our understanding of wild creatures' capacity for memory and connection. The implications of this encounter would ripple through the wildlife rehabilitation community. Emma's detailed documentation would provide valuable insights into long-term rehabilitation outcomes and spark new discussions about animal consciousness and emotional memory. But in that moment, sitting in the sun-warmed clearing, Emma was simply overwhelmed by the profound gift she had received. Luna had grown into exactly what they had worked for, a strong, wild bear living free in her natural habitat. Yet she had also retained something that defied explanation, a recognition of the human who had once helped her survive. Their reunion proved that some bonds transcend the boundaries we create between wild and tame, leaving an indelible mark on both human and animal hearts. The remarkable reunion between Emma Thompson and Luna sent ripples through the wildlife conservation community that would transform how we understand the relationship between humans and wild animals. News of their encounter spread rapidly through professional circles, challenging long-held beliefs about wild animal consciousness and memory. Emma's detailed documentation of their meeting provided unprecedented insight into the long-term impacts of wildlife rehabilitation. The encounter wasn't just extraordinary because Luna had remembered her former caregiver. It was revolutionary because she had maintained her wild nature while retaining that recognition. She demonstrated that successful rehabilitation and emotional memory could coexist without compromising an animal's wild instincts. Mountain Haven Sanctuary experienced a surge of interest from wildlife researchers and rehabilitation experts worldwide. Emma found herself sharing their story at international conferences, where Luna's case became a cornerstone for discussions about animal intelligence and emotional capacity. The scientific community, initially skeptical, couldn't ignore the thorough documentation and multiple witness accounts of Luna's continued wild success, alongside her remarkable recognition of Emma. Local attitudes toward wildlife conservation shifted dramatically. The story of Emma and Luna became a powerful testament to the importance of professional wildlife rehabilitation. Donations to conservation efforts increased, and community support for wildlife protection programs strengthened. The poaching incidents that had once plagued the region decreased significantly as people began viewing bears not just as wild animals, but as intelligent beings capable of profound connections. Emma's rehabilitation methods, refined through her experience with Luna, became standard practice across numerous wildlife sanctuaries. Her emphasis on maintaining wild instincts while providing necessary care proved especially effective. Young rehabilitators trained under her guidance learned to balance professional distance with respectful acknowledgement of each animal's individual nature. Luna's territory became an unofficial case study for successful bear rehabilitation. Forest rangers regularly reported sightings of her and eventually her cubs. She demonstrated all the behaviors of a thriving wild bear, teaching her young to forage, marking her territory, and maintaining a healthy fear of humans, with Emma remaining the sole exception to her wild wariness. The impact on Emma herself was profound. While she had always been dedicated to wildlife rehabilitation, her experience with Luna added new depth to her understanding of animal consciousness. She continued her work with renewed purpose, approaching each new rescue with heightened awareness of the animal's individual capacity for connection and memory. Scientific papers inspired by their story began exploring the complexity of animal consciousness in ways previously dismissed as anthropomorphic. Researchers developed new protocols for studying long-term rehabilitation outcomes, acknowledging that success couldn't be measured solely by survival rates, but must also consider the quality and complexity of the rehabilitated animal's wild life. Perhaps most significantly, Luna's story helped bridge the gap between scientific observation and emotional understanding of wildlife. It demonstrated that acknowledging animals' capacity for memory and connection didn't diminish their wild nature, but rather enhanced our appreciation of their complexity. This new perspective led to more nuanced approaches to wildlife conservation, combining rigorous scientific methodology with recognition of animals' emotional and cognitive depths. As years passed, Luna remained a symbol of successful rehabilitation and the unexpected bonds that can form between species. Her territory became home to multiple generations of bears, as she passed on her wild wisdom to her cubs. Remarkably, while she maintained her unique recognition of Emma, her offspring showed appropriate wariness of humans, proving that her special connection hadn't compromised her ability to raise truly wild bears. Emma continued her work at Mountain Haven Sanctuary until retirement, though she never stopped visiting the forests where Luna roamed. Their story became legend among conservationists, not just for its extraordinary nature, but for how it transformed our understanding of wildlife. Rehabilitation. It proved that success in wildlife conservation isn't measured by creating boundaries between wild and tame, but by fostering respect for the profound complexity of wild animals' emotional and cognitive lives. The legacy of Emma and Luna's bond lives on in changed policies, enhanced rehabilitation methods, and a deeper appreciation for the mysterious connections that can form between species. Their story reminds us that in the vast wilderness that separates the human and animal worlds, there are moments of connection that defy explanation, challenging us to expand our understanding of what it means to be wild, to remember, and to form bonds that transcend the boundaries we create. If this remarkable journey of Emma and Luna touched your heart, there are countless more extraordinary wildlife stories waiting to be discovered. Join our growing community of nature enthusiasts by subscribing to our channel, where we share daily tales of amazing animal encounters, incredible rescues, and heartwarming reunions that challenge everything we know about wildlife. Hit the subscribe button now to ensure you never miss another inspiring story from the wild and become part of our mission to celebrate and protect these magnificent creatures that share our world.